Welcome to the Improve Work podcast. I'm your host, Daniela Tancău, an HR consultant helping entrepreneurs and team leaders build motivated, high-performing teams. Here we talk about leadership, employee motivation, and other topics that enhance your ability to lead. Whether you are an entrepreneur with a team, a business owner planning to build one, or a leader in a company. You'll gain practical advice and insights from me and my guests, experts in the field and entrepreneurs who share their leadership experiences. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe to stay updated on every episode. Let's dive into today's topic. Welcome back to the Improve Work podcast. This episode is about how leaders can give feedback that inspires trust and drives results. My guest is Joan Hibdon, the founder of jdhInsights, a company that provides coaching, consultancy, and learning services focused on developing leadership skills and creating great employee experiences. She has over 20 years of experience as a human resources leader, and if you visit her website, you'll find a variety of services and courses she can offer to you. Although we could have chosen any topic in the HR field, and I'm sure she would have provided us with great advice, we decided to talk about feedback because she wrote a book on this topic. The title of the book is The Leader's Guide to Mastering Feedback. Let's dive in. Welcome to the podcast, Joanne. I'm glad that you are here.
I'm really happy to be here too. It's good to see you. Thanks for the invitation.
Sure, I'm excited about our discussion because you'll share from your book. You wrote a book about feedback, and the book is The Leader's Guide to Mastering Feedback. And that's why we choose this topic, because you have many experience and knowledge to share with us.
I do. I actually love the topic of feedback. It's kind of a fun topic because it's a communication skill that we don't often use. We do use it actually, but it can seem to be hard and a little bit daunting at work.
Yes, yes. So, referring to this, my first question is what are the common mistakes leaders do when they use feedback, when they offer feedback to their employees?
One of the common mistakes that leaders use or leaders encounter is that when they step into providing feedback in ways that perhaps the person on the other side of the feedback isn't quite ready for it. And so sometimes what leaders do, because they've got some pent up energy and they want to get the feedback out of their systems, they want to get it, delivered as fast as they can. They don't recognize that the person on the other end of that feedback isn't even contextually ready for it. And so they're not in a place where they're fully prepared to listen to the feedback and take it in. And so I think that's one of the common mistakes. I think a second common mistake is that leaders don't fully prepare for how they want to give the feedback to the feedback receiver, to their employees. Again, it's often a human desire just to get the message out as fast as you can and not really be thoughtful and prepared.
So feedback should be scheduled to avoid the first mistake that you mentioned.
I think feedback could be scheduled. I think it also could be, and I'll give you, if you're interested in a story about that, I'll tell you a little bit about it.
Yes.
But I also think that it's a notion of even asking for permission, like saying to somebody, I've been noticing something recently in your work performance, and I'd like to provide you feedback. Would that be okay with you? And like again, mentally and contextually getting the other person prepared for it. And sometimes the employee may say yes because they're kind of stuck in the moment, like deer in the headlights. And sometimes they might say, no, I'm not quite ready. But I do want to share, if you don't mind, a quick story about the scheduled feedback. So there was a young lady that called me on a Friday afternoon, and she was an employee, very upset. She wanted to share a story with me, and the story was this. her boss called her on a Friday afternoon and said, I want to schedule a meeting with you on Monday because I want to give you some feedback about something. And the employee said, you want to give me feedback on Monday, but you know what the feedback is today.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd rather you share with me the feedback today because it's Friday. If I don't know what it is, I'm going to be worried about it all weekend. But at this point, either way, you've already made me very anxious. Can you just share the feedback with me right now? And the manager said, well, I wasn't prepared to. And this young lady said, I get that. And now I'm going to be worried about what it is. So can we just talk about this? So
It's funny.
the manager did give the feedback to the employee, and it wasn't that big of a deal. It had to do with a shipping error
Mm-hmm.
that, the employee needed to know about. But after the manager shared the feedback, the employee said, wow, that wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. The employee said, I suddenly felt all kinds of anxiety and stress, that I was in real trouble. And now that you share this with me, I can see that I made a mistake and it's one that I know I can fix in the future. And the
Mm-hmm.
young lady called me and she said, I was so upset because she didn't realize that by telling me on a Friday that she wanted to schedule something with me on Monday about this feedback, how it was going to make me feel anxious. And she
Mm-hmm.
said, so they made an agreement that in the future, the manager just would say, I'd like to give you some feedback. Is now a good time?
Mm-hmm.
And the
Yes.
employee said, it just feels so much better to do that. So that's what I was going to share. So thank you.
Yes, this is what happens when we have the annual evaluation and the leader
Mm,
gives feedback. Uh, the employees are very anxious because they don't know what feedback will they receive, and the whole discussion can be very tension because of this. Yes.
It's a lot of tension, and we feel it in our hearts and in our stomachs and our heads. It's
Mm-hmm.
a lot
Mm-hmm.
of pent up tension because I think as human beings, well, one of the things that I know, just kind of based on the work that I've done in studying this, is receiving feedback is almost the same kind of stress response that we would have had if we were out hunting an animal
Mm-hmm.
or being hunted, like in real danger.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're about ready to receive feedback or if feedback comes our way, it feels our whole body, our whole nervous system feels as though we are in real danger. And it's an exchange of information, but our whole body expects it to be
Mm-hmm.
different. Does that make sense? That's where the tension comes
Yes.
from.
So this is the natural reaction. But what companies, what leaders can do to go a step forward and miss this this fear of the employees? So the employees receive feedback as a normal thing in that company.
Mm. Yeah, I think part of it is, and I'm glad that you said that employees receive feedback as a normal thing. I really think it begins with normalizing feedback. And I think there's a couple of ways that we can start to do it a little bit more constructively, if constructive is the right word. I think during job interview processes, I think asking an employee, how do you like to receive feedback, is a great question. I think saying to the employee, I'd like to, as a manager, I am building a feedback culture.
Mm-hmm.
And so one of the things that you'll experience here is that I may ask you for feedback and I may give you feedback. And let's figure out what that means for both of us and how we both receive feedback. So that I think during the interview process, certainly, during the onboarding process, digging into a little bit more. And then I think also in normal, just one-on-one meetings, there's a 2x2 model that I was introduced to years ago that I find very beneficial, which is when the manager says to an employee, I'd like to give you two pieces of feedback on what you're doing well and two pieces of feedback on what you could do better,
Mm-hmm.
and just keep it real clean that way. And then the manager asks the employee, can you share with me two things that I'm doing well and two things that I could be doing better? And to begin to have that kind of common exchange, in this context, I've just shared, the manager and employee, but even peer to peer, what would it look like for you to be able to say to your peer, I'd like to give you some feedback. Is now a good time? Or, here are two things I think you could do better, and to have this peer to peer feedback. I think, again, it's just starting with figuring out how within your own culture to normalize it so it doesn't become a big fear-based issue or challenge.
Mhm. Coming back at the second common mistake that you mentioned, how can a leader prepare for offering feedback to an employee? And especially if it's a negative or it's not a good thing, because we can give a positive feedback besides other types of feedback.
Yeah, I think positive feedback can sometimes come so naturally and easily because it feels good. I think when we're giving constructive or call it even negative feedback or critical feedback to an employee, I think what a manager can do to prepare is to really think about that particular employee, that person, and to think about that person and what that person means to them. Like, what is their value to the organization? Get a sense of, how much they care about their development and their growth, and really begin to, both mentally and I'm going to say physically, as I'm doing this with my hand, like write things down and writing things down, like, what do I know about this employee? I know this employee is hyper vigilant. I know that they're a perfectionist, things like that. And why is this feedback important for this person and why now?
Mhm.
What is the purpose of the feedback? So getting really clear about the purpose. Is it to help them grow, develop? Is it to help them course correct or fix a common error or pattern? And then begin to kind of map out what are the words that you would use with the employee, not with the purpose to guess or predict what the employee is going to say. For the manager to say something in a manner that comes across as caring and compassionate and like we're in this together. So even though it's critical, it could be that I want to share this feedback because I care about you a lot. And I see that if by not correcting this particular thing, you're going to get stuck and you're not going to grow to the extent that you want to. And I care about you enough that I want you to grow. So I wanted to give you this feedback. And do you see what I'm saying? Just to try to set it up in
Yes.
a manner where the employee really feels cared about and seen and valued, but not criticized.
Mhm. So prepare the stage before deliver the feedback.
Yeah, prepare it before you deliver it. I think, and the point I want to make about that is that it's not preparing to second guess what you think that person's going to say or how they're going to respond. Because the only thing that we can do as leaders and managers in a business is be 100% responsible for who we are and what we say and how it's delivered. We
Mhm.
cannot be responsible for how somebody receives it or perceives it. That's up to that person over there.
Mhm.
So the person, oftentimes people hesitate giving feedback because they don't want the person who's receiving it to get mad or to cry or to quit or get angry or defensive, right? So we can't control how somebody's going to respond. We can only control how we deliver and then how we respond to their response.
Mhm. Do you consider that it's a good practice to give space to the employee to share his perspective when he or she receives a feedback?
I think there's two things that are really helpful and healthy is when a manager gives feedback to an employee, that they give space for the employee's response, knowing that that response is possibly coming from a reactive, defensive place,
Mhm.
and or allowing that employee to process the feedback. So when I think about space, there's two things that can happen. One is the feedback giver gives the feedback, and then as it's kind of landing on the receiver to say, do you need some time to process what I've just said?
Mhm.
And if they do, then give them the time and say, let's get back together later on today, first thing tomorrow, whenever. So, do you need time to process? And if they don't, then, as I mentioned earlier, whatever the response is going to be is the immediate defensive reactive response. It's the first response.
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
may not be the forever response.
Mhm. How can the leader deliver the feedback in a way that, as you said, you have to say what are your intention with that feedback? But how can the leader create trust and the employee understand that the feedback comes from a place of wanting to help the employee to correct some behaviors or actions so they are not they don't repeat in the future? Because um, they may interpret the feedback in the wrong way. And sometimes, in the reality we are living, not always leaders um, deliver feedback as you observe as well in a good way. So the feedback can be correct, but the way it is delivered can be wrong, and this can create the problems. And
Yeah,
on the other part, or on a different scenario, the feedback can be wrong because the leader doesn't have the necessary or accurate information about the situation that he's speaking about. Um,
sure.
how can a leader prepare for um, for this discussion and get the right data and have an objective perspective on the situation?
Yeah. There's a couple of things as you were describing what you were, which is very common, which is sometimes leaders get it wrong. And I think that I think in that particular situation and what how it however it's set up, it's okay for a leader to say, I may have this wrong,
Mhm.
but here's what I've observed. And I wanted to have a conversation with you about what I'm noticing and what I'm experiencing. And so there's a way to set the stage with the employee to say, here's some things that I'm seeing, here's some things that I'm noticing. And I may have this wrong. So I
Mhm.
wanted to check in with you to see what's going on.
Right, and you create space for a discussion, and the employee can share his perspective without being judged or without having your perspective in advance, your judgment in
Right,
advance.
right.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of, I think what leaders could spend a little bit more time doing is, and we all have different types of personalities. There are those of us who are more naturally curious, perhaps less judgmental, people who want to kind of step into to discover what's going on. And I think that there are those leaders out there that also come from a place of needing to be right
Mm-hmm.
and or needing to, you know, have a judgment about something, right? So it's almost like, am I coming in hot or am I coming in soft? And I think having leaders explore, I think for me, I think the leader needs to ask themselves, what outcome do I want to have in having this feedback conversation with this employee?
Mm-hmm.
And if an outcome is that I want to figure out what's going on here so that the issue can be fixed, I think coming in from a place of curiosity is a great place to start. I think if what the leader, and I don't think any it might be a little naive. I don't think any leader wants to negatively impact another person's life. But when you come in hot and you have to be right and or you're judgmental about it, the leader doesn't realize that they're potentially harming somebody's
Not,
psyche.
yes, not necessary, but I saw situation in which the leader is taking part of another employee. So
Mhm.
because he has a friend relationship or other type of relationship with that employee, they tend to take part of that employee, and we don't like to speak about the situation because we want to see the positive things, and we want to see the good part in every people, but that's why people are hurt in the workplace, and they are so defensive because they go through a lot of experience when things are not were not fair to them.
Correct. I think what you're alluding to is that sometimes in the workplace, and many of us, when we enter the workplace, have been in other workplaces where it's been difficult, or perhaps we didn't feel as though we felt safe. So
Mm-hmm.
we're bringing a lot of baggage, psychological baggage with us into the workplace from place to place. And so it's hard to develop that trusting relationship because we don't know what's going to happen on the other side of it. And that is just that takes a lot of conscious work, like the
Mm-hmm.
ability to step into something new and to say, I've never been in this relationship before. And actually, that's another good point. I think sometimes when we start to work together in workplaces, we make assumptions about what our relationship is going to be, but we never quite set it up in a very conscious way to say, in this working relationship, what's important to you? How do you like to
Mm-hmm.
receive feedback? How do you like to communicate best? Um, what's important about certain things that are being set up in our email communications? How do you want to use, you see what I'm saying? We don't often set up our relationships in a very
Mm-hmm.
intentional manner to begin with.
Mm-hmm. So, so the relationship to be trustful and open, because if we don't have a trust in each other, we are not open, and
Correct.
the feedback cannot have the result that we intend.
That is correct.
Um, so these are some critical elements when we give feedback to create
Yes.
trust, and of course we have to prove this over time by doing the correct things over and over again. I
Yeah,
think.
it starts with, what is your intention in the relationship that you want to have with this person, and getting, and not every leader has ever thought about, the intention that I want to have in this relationship is to have a trusting, caring relationship with my employee, and I want to make sure that the work gets done.
Mhm.
Right, you still need results.
How do you know if feedback is really accepted by the person receiving it? Because it's an
Mm,
important piece to accept the feedback.
it's a very important piece. Oftentimes, the feedback giver believes that just by giving them the feedback that it's automatically going to be accepted. I think what's helpful is that after the feedback is delivered, and not right away, but maybe a day or two later, is to check in with the person and to say, we had a conversation the other day, and I just wanted to check in to see if there's any, if you have any questions about what I shared with you. And I'm curious, what are you going to do with, what do you plan to do with the feedback? And not make assumptions that they're going to immediately do something, because sometimes people don't. In fact, years ago, there was a manager that I was working with, and she had provided feedback to her employee about 3 times, and the employee did nothing with it. And I asked the manager, I said, have you followed up with the employee to ask her what she's going to do with the feedback? And the manager said, no, I just figured that because I gave it to her, she would do something. And I said, go back and ask her. So she went and she asked the employee what she was going to do. And the employee said, honestly, I just thought it was you're giving me some nice tips, but I didn't realize you wanted me to do anything with it. And she really hadn't thought it all the way through. And so the employee said, now that I know that you're really serious about it, I'll take care of it. But they had missed, again, there was an assumption that was going on,
Mm-hmm.
and it was clearly missed. Now, I will share a story for myself. A number of years ago, my husband had given me some very important feedback. It was important to him. And he gave me the feedback. And a couple of days later, I came back to him and I said, you gave me that feedback and I thought about it. I don't think I'm going to do anything with it. And I said, here's why. And I explained to him what was going on. And he said, all right, makes sense. I just thought I would share with you what I saw. And I thought it would be helpful. I said, I appreciate it, but I think I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to go ahead and now keep in mind, being in a husband and wife relationship is a very different relationship than a work relationship.
Yes.
In a work relationship, but it can also be, it's still very vulnerable to say to somebody, I'm not going to do the thing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But there has to be some agreement because if a manager gives an employee feedback and the employee says they're going to do something with it and they don't, then trust erodes. It
Yes.
erodes. And so I think and this takes time and again, relationship building and trust. If you really want the employee to be honest and authentic with you, then you have to sometimes create space for the employee to say, I don't think I'm going to do it that way. And here's why, and here's what I see. And then the
Yes.
relationship becomes a little bit more mutual as opposed to an employee feeling like they're being pushed to do something that they may not agree with. And so they just automatically say, okay, I'll do it, but then they don't. And that doesn't help anything either.
Yes, and it's an opportunity for the leader also to know what are the arguments of the employee, and maybe he also have some contra arguments that proves uh, to the employee that his perspective is not so good and is not
Correct.
so helpful. And yes, sometimes the leader doesn't know all the data because he's not in the work in that project himself, maybe, and
Right.
the employee has a more accurate perspective and maybe
Yes.
experience because sometimes we give feedback to people that work in the fields that we are not experienced and maybe we don't know what they know.
Mhm.
so
Yeah. And
so
it becomes a mutual conversation. And, even if you want to use the word, a little bit of a dance between the
yes.
two, which I think is really important because my perspective and how I see things and your perspective and how you see things
Mm-hmm.
might be similar and they might be different. But oftentimes the end result is better because we're sharing the perspectives. And as long as somebody's not going to, be in harm's way or hurt or something like that, I think sharing the perspectives, I think it can be helpful. Um, there are times when the feedback, like course correction, immediate course correction is necessary in situations of safety. Like if
Mm-hmm.
somebody's going to do something and they can't see that they're going to be in harm's way, I think stop, like that,
Yes.
important, that feedback I think is important. But if there is the ability to create some space to come up with a better solution, I think that's helpful. If it has to do with accounting or maths or scientific equations, perhaps not. I mean, there's some real specificity that's needed in those situations or in healthcare situations, right? Those have real results, but depending upon the situation, you've got to fit the right feedback
Mm-hmm.
form into it.
Yes, it depends on the situation. And yes, in many cases, I think that the conversation, that curiosity that you mentioned, it's very important to start the conversation and then involve and get to an agreement on a
Yes,
agreed common perspective on things and on the things that have to be done uh,
yes.
to correct the situation.
And I really have an appreciation for what you just said in terms of get to an agreement. And do we agree that this is the right next thing to do? And that agreement is how we build trust in
Mm-hmm,
relationships.
mm-hmm,
We're like being really honest and authentic about it. Yeah, we agree. And so
mm-hmm.
here's how we're going to go. If one of those two parties says that they agree and they don't, the relationship erodes.
Yes, and they will not do the things that they were told to do, or if they do those things, they are not doing in a convincing, in a engaging way.
Yes. There's that too.
Yes.
It's a
Thank you
good
very
observation.
you had very good points here, John. Thank you very much for sharing from your experience. Can you tell us more about your where can people find the book, and how can they find more about you and your business?
Absolutely, and thank you for asking. So if you're interested more about the book can be found on Amazon. It can be found on Audible. We're not quite ready for some of the other media streaming types of things from a listening standpoint, but those are the two main places to find it. As it relates to my business, you can find me on LinkedIn under Joan. I also go by Joni, Joni, and my last name Hibdon, Hibdon. My email address is joan@jdhInsights, INSIGHTS.com. And my email, or I'm sorry, my website is www.jdhInsights.com. And I'll spell that out again. It's jdhInsights.com. And the reason that Insights is part of my JDH is because I've been told over the years that I provide some valuable insights to people. And so that's how I ended up naming my business.
I will put all these links in the show notes.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Daniela.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for watching this episode. If you found value in this podcast, subscribe to stay updated. I'm grateful for your support and hope to continue providing content that helps you grow. See you in the next episode.